Speaker, it is an absolute honour to rise in this venerable House to speak on a topic of great importance, not only to the residents of my riding of Davenport, but also of great importance to Canada and indeed the world. Before I give my prepared speech, I want to say that on the surface, by the government not supporting this NDP motion, it seems like the government is saying that we do not support nuclear disarmament, that this is not an issue of great importance to this government, but nothing could be further from the truth, Mr. Speaker. The federal government that I'm proud to be a part of is strongly supportive of taking concrete action towards nuclear disarmament, and we are taking a leadership role and meaningful steps towards achieving a world free of nuclear weapons. The bottom line of why we're not supporting this motion is that we think that the current discussions on this convention are premature. And I'm going to give you a little bit more context over the course of the next 9 minutes, Mr. Speaker, about why we're on the current path that we are on today and why engaging this draft convention is not the right step at this moment. In 2008, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon outlined his signature 5-point plan addressing the topic of security in a nuclear weapon-free world. And I'm going to outline those 5 points in this proposal, Mr. Speaker, and the reason is because we're largely following it, because we believe it is the right step-by-step approach towards a nuclear arms-free world. The first point that he outlined is that all parties to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, especially the nuclear weapon states, should fulfill their obligation to enter into negotiations on effective measures leading to nuclear disarmament. He suggested the negotiation of a comprehensive nuclear weapons convention. He circulated an updated document called the Model Nuclear Weapons Convention to UN member states earlier that year. This model convention was 80 pages long, 20 articles, 5 separate indexes. It was quite extensive, and it outlined the use, the possession, the development, the testing, the deployment, and transfer of nuclear weapons, and perhaps most importantly, it would mandate the internationally verifiable dismantlement of nuclear arsenals. In contrast, the draft convention on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, which is currently what we're talking about, and currently under negotiation at the United Nations, is a mere 8 pages long. Unlike the comprehensive convention that I just mentioned, the proposed convention concentrates primarily on legal prohibitions. It contains no provisions to eliminate even a single nuclear weapon or any verification measures. Moreover, as mentioned, no nuclear weapon states are participating in these negotiations because they do not take into account the current international security context of Russian military expansionism or North America's testing of nuclear devices and ballistic missiles designed to threaten the whole Asia-Pacific region, including North America. Sadly, as I've said before, this convention is premature and will be ineffective, Mr. Speaker, in advancing tangible nuclear disarmament. Now, let me be clear. Canada strongly favors the negotiation of a nuclear weapons ban, a nuclear weapons convention or ban, but as the final step in a progressive, step-by-step approach to nuclear disarmament. We believe that there needs to be 3 other steps first. The universalization of a nuclear non-proliferation treaty. We believe there needs to be entry into force of the comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty and the negotiation of a fissile material cutoff treaty. We believe these are mutually enforcing steps, we believe they're mutually enforcing instruments, and we believe that this approach aims to halt the spread of nuclear weapons, end nuclear explosive testing, reduce existing nuclear weapons and fissile material stockpiles, and build the trust and confidence to verifiably and irreversibly eliminate nuclear weapons. Mr. Speaker, this is why Canada last year led a very successful UN General Assembly resolution to establish a high-level expert participatory group to clear the path for the eventual negotiation of a fissile material cutoff treaty, or FMCT, to ban the production of the explosive materials used in nuclear weapons. By pursuing the important technical work of a FMCT in the 25-member UN preparatory group that we chair, Canada hopes to be able to present the Conference of Disarmament with draft treaty provisions that will enable this body to commence negotiations on this important agreement. Mr. Speaker, the Secretary General also identified the need for more investment by governments in disarmament verification, research and development. I am pleased to let you know, Mr. Speaker, that the Government of Canada has actively responded to this call by providing expert input for the International Partnership for Nuclear Disarmament Verification. Officials and experts from Global Affairs Canada, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories are making important contributions to addressing the technical challenges of nuclear disarmament verification. This important work is aimed at building global nuclear disarmament verification capabilities, and it's essential for the successful implementation of a comprehensive nuclear weapons convention and is a key element of our pragmatic step-by-step approach to disarmament. I'm also pleased to announce, Mr. Speaker, that Canada, through the Global Affairs Weapons of Mass Destruction Threat Reduction Program, these are very short-named programs, so I'll say that again, Global Affairs Weapons of Mass Destruction Threat Reduction Program has just provided a financial contribution to help support the work of the international partnership over the next week. So not only are we saying that we're getting engaged, not only are we actively involved in it, but we're actually funding this commitment. The second point that the Secretary General made in his call for the nuclear weapon states to assure non-nuclear weapon states will not be the subject of the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons. So again, the second point of the Secretary General's 5-point proposal was this call for the nuclear weapon states to assure non-nuclear weapon states that they will not be the subject of the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons. These assurances are also known as negative security assurances, or NSAs. Canada has been a proponent of such guarantees. We are the leading participant of the 12-member non-proliferation and disarmament initiative, and we have worked closely with our partners to develop ideas in the form of papers and to promote these assurances in the international arena, most recently in the 2017 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Preparatory Committee meeting that was held in Vienna this just recent May. The third point that the Secretary General made is a very, very important one. It calls for existing nuclear arrangements and agreements, like the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which prohibits the testing of nuclear weapons, like nuclear weapon-free zones, and strengthened safeguards which need to be accepted by states and brought into force. In support of this approach, the Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs joined the ministerial level group of friends at the UN General Assembly in pointedly calling for the remaining eight states to ratify the agreement immediately to bring it into force. For our part, we have passed legislation to implement the CTBT when it enters into force, and we've completed the installation of 16 monitoring stations as part of this agreement. The fourth point that our Secretary General made is his call for nuclear powers to expand the amount of information they publish about the size of their arsenals, the stocks of fissile materials, and specific disarmament achievements. Mr. Speaker, you will be pleased to hear that Canada has taken a leading role in promoting greater transparency by the nuclear weapon states in the reporting of their nuclear weapon stocks. Within the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Initiative, Canada has developed a standard reporting form which we're asking nuclear weapon states to use for their regular reports on the implementation of their nuclear disarmament obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We firmly believe that reporting is an effective instrument for increasing transparency on nuclear disarmament activities and for greater accountability. More needs to be done, of course, and Canada and our partners in the NDPI are committed to working with nuclear powers to improve their reporting through concentrated follow-up efforts. The Secretary General's final point is that in addition to nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament efforts, complementary measures are also needed. Such measures include the elimination of other types of weapons of mass destruction, for example, chemical and biological weapons, and new efforts need to be undertaken to prevent weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, limit conventional arms, and ban new types of weapons, including missiles and space weapons. Canada is a leader, Mr. Speaker, in pursuing these types of efforts. The government is making good on its commitment to accede to the Arms Trade Treaty and investing $13 million to allow Canada to implement the treaty and further strengthen its export regime control. Mr. Speaker, Canada is firmly committed to achieving a nuclear weapons-free world. In conformity with the UN Secretary General's 5-point plan, we're pursuing a pragmatic step-by-step approach aimed at building the necessary confidence and trust needed for nuclear weapons to no longer be considered necessary for security. I am proud to be able to say today that Canada is continuing its long tradition of leadership on disarmament issues, including strongly supporting this 5-point plan. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to speak on behalf of the residents of Davenport today. I now welcome any questions.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm pleased to see so many people participating in what I consider a very important debate. But, Mr. Speaker, we're glad that the Liberal members are noticing the 5-point plan by former head of the UN, Ban Ki-moon. And of course, that was the plan that was endorsed by their members and all those in the House. But what they're failing to notice is what the current head of the UN is saying, and the majority of people in the world. What they're saying is they're no longer confident in the step-by-step approach. They want action on all of the commitments under the non-proliferation treaty, which Canada is signatory to. And one of those obligations is to participate in negotiations for a ban treaty. So, indeed, it's great that the Liberal government is participating in an array of activities, and we commend them for that. But they're still not giving any credible argument for why they're refusing to participate in this action, which they claim to support, multilateral treaty negotiation at the UN. So, I'm wondering if the member could speak to why is it that they absolutely refuse to speak to the actual essence of our motion today, and that is their failure to not only participate but to boycott negotiations among the majority of nations in the world endorsed by over 100, or is it Canada, and almost every one of the former diplomats who have been appointed to speak on disarmament for our country.
Member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for her excellent question. Mr. Speaker, as our Right Honourable Prime Minister said the other day in question period, all Canadians strongly support concrete actions towards nuclear disarmament. And we believe that the step-by-step approach where we are engaging in those states with nuclear arms is the best way forward for us to move towards a nuclear arms-free world. We are taking action. We are taking leadership. We're putting the proper amount of financing behind each of our actions. And so I feel that we feel that this is the best approach in order to move forward as expeditiously as possible. So we're taking meaningful steps to achieve nuclear action, and as we mentioned, we are doing the hard work of actually leading and rallying 159 different states to support and pass a resolution calling for the fissile material cutoff treaty, which we led late last